right, you are listening to Addicts in Recovery. This is your 3 favorite hosts on Recovery Talk. I am Zach, and I am an addict.
And I am Mike, and I'm an alcoholic.
And I am Kevin, I'm an alcoholic.
We are here to basically talk recovery.
Yeah, that's our mission. Our goal is to spread that positivity that you're not alone, that you can do this. There's hope out there for the addict and normies out there, that there is a better side of this.
Reach out. We have plenty of platforms that you can reach us on. Insta Mike knows what's up.
Find us on Instagram, Addicts in Recovery, AIR. We're going to be keeping you updated on all of our current episodes and positivity and thoughts and ideas and updates on what we're doing.
We also want to know, what is your feedback? I mean, how do we sound? What do you want to hear or talk about? Do you have any questions or like any specific topics that you want us to talk about?
Give us some subjects that you want to hear us talk about. Exactly.
And then you can find us on SoundCloud, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, literally any
iTunes,
anything. If it has a podcast, we're on it now.
You'll find us.
Today we have a show about moms, family members.
In recovery. Or not in recovery, but family members of people that are in recovery. And so we brought on our friend Cyndi, who is a mother of our friend in recovery right now. So we hope you enjoy the show. So you have a son that is in recovery, or that has lived a long life of active addiction. Mm-hmm. So let's start young. What was it like? Because none of your other kids are in active addiction, right? Well. Yeah. Anyway,
yeah.
But so you got we got the one. And what was he like as a kid? Was he any different than the other kids? Was he any? Was there anything kind of
that like stood out to you?
That stood out to you?
Yeah, from even the time when he was a little boy, he just had such a tender heart. We couldn't drive down Wall Street when we'd come to Ogden, because there was homeless people there. And he always seemed to feel things deeper and took things harder. But he was a great kid, honestly. I mean, he'd fold his dirty laundry to bring it up to me. I mean, that's how conscientious he was. And so, I think that has a lot to do with the way that a person takes things in.
You think that like an elevated, that people that deal with addiction have kind of a heightened feeling, like a heightened sense of emotions, is what you're saying. And so you could see that in him.
Mm-hmm. But he was my first. I didn't see it as being anything that would give off red flags. Uh-huh. But of all, I would say 95% of the addicts that I have worked with. Uh-huh. Are the sweetest men I've ever met, or women that I've ever met. They just have the kind of hearts that the world isn't very good to. The world doesn't know how to treat people.
And you're talking about the people that you worked with. You are a licensed clinical social worker.
Yes.
And how many years have you been doing that for?
Well, I've been a social worker for almost 25 years. I've had my master's degree in a private practice for the last 12 years.
So, like, what sparked you to kind of want to go down that avenue?
I always wanted to. I always wanted to help people.
Do you think it had anything to do with your son? Like as far as growing up with kind of a heathen, I guess, did that have anything to do? Do you think that had anything to do with it?
No, because I've looked back in journals where I talk about wanting to be a counselor, and I didn't even know really what that meant. Mm-hmm. But I always wanted to be a counselor. I think his addiction is kind of what moved me in the direction that I went. Absolutely, in grad school. I took a substance abuse domain, and I thought, In fact, I thought before I actually went into practice that I wanted to work with teenagers. And that changed rapidly. That quickly changed.
You're like, I'm out.
Yeah. And so, it's just something that I've always been interested in. And I'm really glad that I had that experience, even though I really can't say that my education taught me much about addiction and, living with a family member that has addiction.
As much as life experience.
As much as life experiences. The mistakes, the positive things.
You mentioned that you also studied in sexual addiction.
Yes.
And my question is, do you find, I often when people, they ask me like about, well, I'm a drug addict, I can't go to AA or that kind of thing. And I always respond to, it's all the same chains with different hooks.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So do you find there's, similarities? Is it all the same?
Well, I think the impact can be different, but addiction is rooted in shame. And we all have some degree of shame. It's how we process it, and it's the traumas that we've experienced. It's not so much the traumas, it's what's the trauma said to us about us.
Right.
But, the coping strategies of addicts, they're all the same, irrespective.
Right.
Of, what it is. Food, sex, drugs.
So the way I take it, the way I've been taught is we deal with the physical addiction first,
Mm-hmm.
and then we figure out why we keep going there.
Right.
So there's still more work to do after the physical addiction has been ceased.
Well, and people that don't do that, they may go the rest of their life without using. But if they're still living by the same behaviors that they did when they used, things aren't gonna change as far as their relationships go. And so the physical aspect, absolutely is first. And a lot of people will do that. They'll just get sober, they'll just get clean, but they'll continue to use those addictive behaviors. And consequently, their relationships don't change.
Right.
So
I believe they call that white knuckling it.
Yeah.
Or like what about
A dry addict is what I reference
sure.
it.
Right.
Or like a cross addiction, pulling different addictions or behaviors from that as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So when growing up, as a kid, you just saw Chad as kind of a higher emotional, heightened sense of emotion.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
At what age did you start seeing kind of addictive tendencies, traits, I guess?
Well, he was 13 when I first found out that he was smoking cigarettes. Go figure.
He was kind of old, actually.
That was a pretty easy one to figure out too. You're like,
Well, I said that's when I figured it out, not when I knew it.
you've been hanging out in a bowling alley?
Yeah. You'd say, oh, this guy at work, Mommy smokes every time when we go out on break, and I'm like,
So you
okay.
And he's
started
only
noticing.
13.
And he's only 13.
So you started noticing this behavior of already lying and coming up, conjuring stories to you. Did you believe him?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, why wouldn't I? I didn't, Back then, we didn't even talk about anxiety and depression in kids. Nobody, there was no education, certainly no treatment for it, But so, it freaked me out. He went to live with my mother for about 6 months when he was, when he was 13. Because I remember that that night I went to a choir concert of one of my other kids, and they sang the song Somewhere Out There. And I remember just sitting there and bawling because, he wasn't with me. He wasn't with us. He wasn't with our family.
Wow.
So you, that was kind of almost the first affirmative action that you took towards his kind of negative behaviors. 6 months at Mom's house, this is kind of a strong push.
At Grandma's
house? Yeah.
Yeah.
Whose choice was that? I mean, was it
It was his.
really?
To go stay with at my parents, because Chad's always been really close to my mom and dad, and he felt like he wanted to get away, that he would get in more trouble if he stayed here with a group of friends. So it was more to, to help him rather than being punitive.
So I'm just trying to jump. So his relationship with the other siblings at the time, I mean, how was that? Was there any impact on that? With like, describe their relationships, I guess.
Absolutely, because he was the big brother, and boy, I've got some memories of those other 5 kids, standing on the porch while the police took Chad away in handcuffs, and or when he overdosed, coming home to find them the first time he overdosed. But they loved him. I mean, he was a sweet person, still is.
So one thing I noticed, especially with my in-laws or my wife's side of the family, they have their oldest son, very similar story, Chad. When I actually went to rehab with your son.
Yes.
And it's very similar, almost same age. They both have a child, same age. It's really kind of crazy. And I have noticed this pattern that my brother-in-law takes up so much attention and clogs up so much of the family, and it makes so many of the people in my wife's side of the family really upset. Did you see the same?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, because they do take up a lot of time, and if he wasn't taking up a lot of time, I was in my bedroom crying or being upset or being depressed, and so absolutely, it greatly impacted probably the two children that followed him, but my youngest daughter, that's all she's known, because Chad was on drugs when she was born, and so that is the only Chad that she knows, and that was a big piece of it, and it's a big piece of what I hear from other parents, is that they're emotionally neglecting their other kids, because particularly with moms, because what is the quote? A mother is only as happy as her most unhappy child. And you enter in all the fear and the unknown and the lack of knowledge about drugs, and it becomes all consuming. And they feel it.
I mean, now like today, present time, I mean, do you still feel some of that vibe from your other children as well?
Yes.
Yeah.
They don't want to, they're adults, but they have lived this for 25 years. They've watched the impact that it had on me. And, but slowly but surely, they've come to accept the fact that Chad is an addict and that he may or may not remain sober. But most of them, I would probably say all of my kids at one point stepped away, and it really felt like it was just me, because moms don't give up.
Just
Right.
out of curiosity, did any of them, or maybe even you, seek help from like Al-Anon or anything?
No, boy, he went. He came back home after being at my mom's, and then he went to Arizona to stay with we called them our other parents, and he went to rehab there.
And what age was this?
What age was this? I think it was he was 15.
So it progressed from 13 to 15, smoking cigarettes to
Smoking weed.
smoking
Okay.
weed. Okay.
And at that point in time, he went into treatment at 15 years old.
Yeah.
What do you know? What kind of like facility it was? I mean, was it like a state-run facility for youth, or was it was a private?
No, it was a private. Our insurance paid for it. I remember that. Then when he was 16, he went again. He went to Lakeview Hospital, to theirs, and came home and started using. Well, he borrowed my car 2 days later, and when I went to clean it out, I found a bong. So, he went right back to it.
So going to these treatment centers at this age, he wasn't like, "Mom, I want to go."
No.
It was more forced.
It was you're going.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not
it was
many,
you're going.
not many teenagers want to walk into a treatment center and
No.
just give up their
A lot of adults don't either.
What was
No.
his behaviors? Was he missing school? Was he angry? Was he sleeping all the time? I mean,
You know, everything kind of started to change. You know, Chad went from a young man that honestly took longer to get ready for school than my girls did. Because, you know, he just, everything had to be perfect, to a kid that didn't care at all what he looked like, and getting in trouble by, you know, picking up charges, even as a juvenile, going to jail, and yeah, that began the roller coaster. At one point, when he had a probation officer, they were, you know, back then you couldn't test for all the things that you can now, but weed would show up. So he and his buddies went to acid, because acid didn't show up on drug. So it was total. In Chad's life, he has been he's been to, I think this was his 10th rehab before he got it.
so I guess I just wanted to kind of draw a picture of this isn't. It's not some kid just smoking pot and sitting on the couch giggling. I mean, he got in trouble. It was causing problems.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's not exactly that you sent him to rehab over a moral dilemma of smoking weed.
Because I caught him smoking weed.
Right.
No, he
Right.
was getting in trouble. He was getting in trouble at school. He was getting in trouble with the law. And, you know, I think he was getting deeper into things.
Right, because some people say, well, you know, I smoke pot and like I don't feel like I need to go to rehab, and or you know, I have an addiction, and I'm like, well, if it's not a problem, it's not a problem. But this obviously was
a
causing some
problem.
problems. Okay.
So first time he goes into a treatment facility, 15 years old, what was your initial thought?
You know, the thing that I remember the very most about every aspect of this was there was so much fear. So much fear that it wouldn't work, that he wouldn't get sober, that he'd come home and use again. And, you know, the fact that he was so far away and I couldn't see him was difficult as well.
Did you feel it? I mean, being a mother, being a parent, did you feel that you failed? Like you did something wrong to create this? Like people were looking at you a certain way that you like get a hold of your child?
Yeah. I did. You know, I really did, because I think there's a false belief that if you caused it, you can fix it. And so I clung tightly to that, was because then I could change. You know, I could do this better. I can do that better. And
So you believe that you took what he went through, the drugs and the kind of the criminal behavior, and you put it on yourself. That's the right now, the Cyndi we're talking to right now, what would you say to that behavior, to a parent that's doing that?
don't. Just don't. Because it isn't about you. It's not about what you do and what you don't do. It's about a choice. You know, it's their choice. Now, we didn't, you know, in our family, there was no abuse. There wasn't a lot of yelling. We had a pretty normal little Mormon family. And, you know, well-liked. Chad had good friends. And so, and I was struggling with depression. That was the bigger piece. And so, you know, that was easy for me to latch onto and say, if I wasn't depressed, this wouldn't have happened. You know, if I was a better mother. And part of that, you know, without going into any real details, is that I didn't know but that I was living with another addict as well, who had a secret addiction. And so, you know, between the two, I was convinced that it was something that I was doing. Something that I was doing wrong.
I'd like to ask a question.
Go for it.
I'd like to explore that. that choice thing that you said.
Mm-hmm.
Is it at one point
It was
a choice,
right,
But then
right.
it becomes not a choice.
Well, I always tell people that.
I'm not stating that as that's a fact. I'm asking you.
No, I think it is. In fact, I tell
Okay.
people that, that say, well, they're choosing to use drugs. It's like, no, they chose to use drugs. The consequence of that choice is that they lose the ability to choose. Because,
Okay, and I thought that was kind of important to bring
yeah,
up.
yeah. That's what I tell people a lot.
Right. And I try to tell people that ask me questions about
Mm-hmm.
addiction. There's a saying, because we all love these sayings.
Mm-hmm.
It's your choice to pick up the first drink, and then it's the drink's choice all the way after
All
that.
the way after that, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Same
cool.
kind of.
Thank you.
Same. Yeah.
So
Tuned in.
So I got a question.
Okay.
Not that this is like trying to bring up some sort of a regret process or something, but if you could jump back into then again, not saying it would change anything,
With what I know now.
what you know now, what advice would you give people that are maybe like having a child that is going through a very similar thing where they catch their child, drinking or smoking cigarettes or getting expelled from school because they did something, what would you say to yourself?
Well, I would, right or wrong, this is what I often tell parents, when they come in and they got a 15-year-old that's, they found out has been using drugs and they're going to ship him off to rehab. I tell them, save your money. Save your money.
I love that.
I do. Save your money because, like I said, we put him in, every rehab that we could when he was using, but he didn't want to. We made him go. And so the minute he was out, he just picked up where he left off. And
probably carried some resentment towards you.
oh, absolutely,
Just-
absolutely,
Oh, yeah.
because it was a matter of you're going to rehab.
As far as not even from a clinical standpoint, but from more of a mother standpoint, you saw now that you might as well have let him kind of be the hoodlum that he was, and either let him run himself out or let the law run himself out, instead of wasting the time, the money, and the energy on regularly sending him to treatment centers at such a young age.
And therapists, they don't, if, he didn't want it. He didn't want it. And in the end, my dad used to always tell me this, and he had dementia towards the end, and so I heard this more times than I ever. I have it memorized. I mean, I did. And every time, my mother would be rolling her eyes like, oh my gosh, you're telling that again. But
and with an Alzheimer's patient, the worst thing you can do is tell them you just said that. You don't.
yeah, Dad, you told me that story
Yeah, you
already.
don't say that.
No, you don't. Plus, but what he told me, when I would go to him because of my, my concerns about Chad, and it's going to sound really simple, but he said, Cyndi, the only thing you can do is love him and make sure that he knows you love him. And in the end, and with Chad's willingness, that was really what brought it about. Now, we have to address the whole issue of codependency. Because, boy, if you looked it up in the dictionary back then, I guarantee you my face would have been plastered all over the place. All over the place.
Really?
Oh, absolutely.
How so? A lot of people that are going to be listening to this podcast probably don't know what codependency is. So, what's the kind of I guess your clinical
Definition?
not definition, but just kind of summary. There we go. What's your clinical summary of what codependency is and looks like?
Well, another name that it's called is co-addict, because you become addicted to the addict. You become addicted to the child, to stopping him from using, to, trying to catch him.
So it becomes
I mean,
obsessive.
Absolute, yeah, obsessive. And so your life becomes as consumed as the addict does, only it's with the addict. And, codependency really gets a bad name. People hate when you say that. But in all honesty, codependency is how many people survive living with an addict. They need it. They need that. The problem that develops is when you no longer need it, but you continue to use it in your relationships. That's when codependency. And I used to get, I'm embarrassed of some of the crazy things that I've done. The first time I think it was the first time, I don't know, I must have found out something, because I got in my car. Now, remember, I'm this naive little Mormon mother, and I was so angry that I drove around to find where his friends were hanging out, on the street, and I'd roll down my window and I'd go, I'd just flip them off. Just flip them off.
She's using the finger.
Yeah, I'm using the finger.
If I was hanging out with your son, I'd be like, I'm not going over there.
Exactly. Well, and you know what? They were.
Dude, is that your mom?
Yeah. And I think his friends were scared of me.
Yeah, I'd be terrified.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Driven by that fear. And when you're fearful for the life of your child, you do some crazy, crazy stuff. And I did. I hid under a truck for an hour.
All right, tell us the background behind that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Are you really going to stop right there?
No, yeah. This is probably one of my most infamous ones. Well, there's a couple I'll share. But this particular night, he was working at Arby's, and I didn't believe that he would leave when he said he would. So I was going to catch him. I wasn't going to let him know I was catching him, but I was going to have the truth, and I was going to be waiting with it when he got home. So there was across the gravel road. It was a gravel road. There was it was Vesco's. It was a motorcycle place, whatever. But there was a truck with a trailer bed, and I was just sitting on the trailer bed, watching. It was dark. When all of a sudden he and his buddies come out to the front and sit on the table out there and start smoking. Well, I heard one of them say, "Dude, is that somebody over there?" And I thought, "Oh shit!" So I rolled off the trailer, and I hid underneath it, in the gravel.
Did they watch you roll off the
No,
trailer?
no, they never knew I was there.
They probably did.
You just see
and
someone
they- and they were scared and they left.
No, they didn't. They didn't. And that was the irony of it, was they sat out there for an hour. And here I am stuck under this truck. It's cold, gravel all over. And they sat out there and smoked for an hour. And so it kind of, but you know what? That's what you do.
But it becomes obsessive, like I'm
It
saying.
becomes
So
obsessive.
at this point, you're focused so on Chad, and you have 5 other kids at home, and it's taking over your life. It's taking over you.
It does, especially back then. What was? I tapped my phones. Back then, you could get this recorder from
Damn, she should be a CIA
Man.
agent. Did you?
from Radio Shack that recorded your phone, because I wanted to know where he was going, and so I could
What the hell's
catch him.
going on? And yeah.
Well, I didn't know anything about drugs, okay, but I hear him say,
I'm so ready for this.
so I hear him say, "Yeah, bring me a dime's worth. Bring me a dime." So he's sitting out there. I go storming out there, and he's sitting out there on the porch waiting for his buddy. So I throw a quarter at him, and I said, "Here, get a quarter's worth," because I thought he was talking about 10 cents. Yeah, I did.
Wow.
I've come a long way, haven't I? Haven't I come a long way?
At that point, did he realize that you had hurt him, or did he just think you were a crazy person?
He just thought I was crazy because I was.
Oh.
There was many times that I was. But yeah, those are some of the, my infamous ones.
So I got a question for you. Let's talk about the good. Let's talk about positive things that you were doing and you noticed positive changes in Chad, like good times with maybe something you did or you acted different or you're showing like what you said of what your father, the advice of giving him love. Mm-hmm. Do you have any examples of that, of maybe where you could see some of that good, where you wish that you could?
That I couldn't.
Yeah.
I wish that I couldn't see the good in him because I knew it. I knew it was there. And so that was an easy way for me to make excuses for him, to justify for him, because I believed in him and I wanted to believe in him. Because, part of this, and I'm owning this because I see it in a lot of other individuals, particularly mothers. When when there is emotional absence in your marriage, oftentimes you turn to your oldest son, to meet those emotional needs. Now, I don't mean, anything that's, scanty or anything, but just to feel that closeness, to have somebody to listen to you and talk to you. And that's what happened with Chad and I. We had kind of an enmeshed relationship. And
Do you think he took some of that on himself?
oh, absolutely. I know he did. To worry about me. Plus, I was talking to him about adult things. And he was a kid. And, I think when he's heard this, he denies it. But there was. He was too tied to my apron strings. And I didn't know why. Because, like I said, I didn't know about the other addiction that was going on in our family. And so Chad was kind of my go-to person. And he kind of shouldered that responsibility. And, I don't want to say that I blame myself, but I think that played a part. That having that, feeling that responsibility when you're already so tender-hearted. I own that part that I think contributed, to his self-medicating or whatever. But the hardest part, for a mother, is that to do the right thing for your child, it goes against every God-given instinct that you have as a mother, to protect, to nurture, to, support, to love. And you can't do any of those things when you're living with an addict. I'm kind of deviated from your question,
No.
but positive things. And like I said, boy.
So when you would start doing those things, though, you started noticing your relationship with him better, though.
No.
No?
Originally, it was originally enabling because I couldn't not do it. I remember sitting in a therapist's office and him saying to me, talking to him about Chad, and him saying to me, Cyndi, you're going to have to let go. And I remember it literally felt like a knife went through my heart. And I looked at him and I said, I can't. I can't.
And this is say what age was he when?
16.
Okay.
So this is right after he started going into treatment facilities. That's what you're saying.
So this kind of goes back to a question that if we can kind of go back for just a second.
Yeah, and then I want to answer. No, not now. No, go ahead.
So you were talking about about people saving their money for about him going into, you said, like 10 treatment centers and all kind of counselors and therapists. As opposed to what? Like, you know, you said your father was telling you about, you know, basically be there, just be there for him. Let him know that he's loved. You are an open door, you know. Do you feel that the centers that he went to and the therapists and stuff, at least maybe, you know, staved off death? I mean, as opposed to what? Letting him hit rock bottom on his own?
Well, it was probably to try to save him, you know. He had some good therapists. He had one that really, that Chad loved. But as I look back now, he wasn't good.
But I guess my question is if you had chosen, you know, to save your money and not send him to all those treatment centers, what would you have done?
That's a way better way to rephrase that question.
Yeah.
Could you rephrase it for me?
Yeah.
No, that was perfect.
Yeah.
The first one was super confusing.
Oh, okay.
You know what? I would have him in counseling, if nothing else, so that he could learn tools. And you got to remember too, at that point in time, it depends to the degree to which the addiction is. At that time, you know, he was just using weed, but weed scared me. Because, you know, back then it was the real push of it's the gateway drug.
Right.
It's the devil's lettuce.
It's the devil's. There you go. I've never heard that.
Yeah.
I like that.
I love that one.
But you,
it's on a t-shirt.
oh, you know, I look back and like I said, I was crazy. I did some crazy shit. Trying to control him, because that's what it boils down to, is that, you know, in order to cope with my fear, and this is true with most, rather than deal with it, we try to control the other person, and it doesn't work. It never works. And
And that's where that codependency thing
that's
comes
where the
in.
codependency thing. And you know, going back to, you know, what would you tell them? And even as I tell, you know, young parents this, I know they can't do it. I know they can't, because you have to go through a process. I had to go through a process that was really my rock bottom. And so to say, you know, this is what you should do. And what I tell people is, all that energy that you are putting into your child, you need to put it into you. You need to put it in to strengthen you. You know, I call self-care like an armor. Just because you do it doesn't mean that, you know, the darts aren't going to hit you and the pains aren't going to hit you, but they're not going to penetrate you. And you can, you know, you survive it. But it's too hard to do. If I could have told myself back then, I wouldn't have been able to do it.
Screw you.
I would have been like, you're like, but you don't understand.
Yeah.
I can't.
Well, see, because I noticed that same pattern with my mother-in-law. She almost makes like these, I almost call them like micro goals. Mm-hmm. You know, like, oh, I could see him. He just needs to do this.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
And he needs to, if he does this, then that is the answer. And if he gets to there, then it's like, then you hear all these stories, and like, you know, all the siblings in the family were just like, we don't want to hear it. We're over it. We don't,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
you know, it's not that mother-child bond. It's a sibling saying, this is so self-consuming and I don't want to hear it anymore.
Yeah. And honestly and understandably, that's where all my kids got to a point with. Because they were tired of being hurt, and they were tired of watching me be hurt every time he relapsed and used again.
And they're sitting there going, Mom, come on, you knew this was
Yeah.
going to happen. Mom, come
Yeah.
on, you
Yeah.
know this over
Yeah.
and
Not
over
again.
again.
Well,
you,
and
you
it's,
see the phone number and you're jumping to it, and
oh yeah. And Chad was not a nice addict. He could go after me like, oh. And I didn't have the skills then to understand, or to, when he was younger, you know. Oh,
So when he was younger and you were he's going through these treatment centers, and you almost you are going through your own kind of addiction and obsession, and all of these things are going back and forth. What was, I guess, what was kind of, how long did it take until you hit a point where you were like, this is where I need to change something? A lot of people don't find that point. So like Mike was saying about the mother-in-law, right? Is she hasn't hit that point of, I just take it. I can't. I have nothing to do with this now. At how long did you go with the hiding under trailers and constantly thinking and worrying and getting hurt all the time, and like how long was that process before you kind of decided to make a change?
Before I got, you mean like before I got stronger and more?
Yeah.
It's really hard to question because you get better at it. You lose some of the crazies, but as far as the letting go piece, that takes a lot. You talk about a rock bottom for the addict. I had to hit a rock bottom too.
And
as parents.
What was your rock bottom? If you can put it into words.
When, it's probably 2 years ago. And
2 years ago.
Well,
so,
not completely. I mean, this isn't a kind of an all or nothing thing. Chad lived in Arizona for a long time, and it was really easy for me then to not think about it, to not let it consume my life, until he got in a lot of trouble again. So, it's a progression. But 2 years ago, I got really, really sick. And Chad and I shared the same physician, and he had given her permission to talk to me. And she had told me, if Chad does not stop using, he's going to be dead in 3 months. And, I took that to heart because I'm thinking, there's no money. I don't have any money to get him help. I can't do it. And I got really sick one day with a migraine. And my doctor even had to drive me home. And she said to me, Cyndi, the only thing, because I could detach, I could do that fairly easily.
Yeah. By this time, you're a trained clinician. I mean,
Yeah.
you
Oh, yeah.
know all of the steps it takes to detach.
But then again, you're like, not again. I
Right.
don't want to go through this again.
Right.
Okay.
Every time.
Okay, keep going.
And she said to me, Cyndi, the only thing that Chad has never had to do without is your emotional support. You've cut off money. You've cut off, I'd go for months, and I'd tell him, as long as you're using, you're not welcome in my life. And then, he'd get himself together and back in my life again. But that made a lot of sense to me because she said, Chad has lost everything. But he's never lost your emotional support. And she said, for your own health, you need to let that go. And I did. And it was more than just saying, welcome in my house, or you can't be here if you're using. It was that I had to completely withdraw. When I call it a gentle detachment. It's where you're supportive and you're understanding and you're kind, but you don't engage your heart. And that's probably what saved me until he continued to just be really, really off the hook. Getting deeper and deeper and deeper into the meth. And when she told me that on several occasions. But this time, she had just barely seen him. And, she said to me, Cyndi, he's not going to live. He's not going to survive this if he doesn't quit. And at that point, my thought became, okay, Chad's not going to quit. He's not going to quit. I'm not going to spend the last few months of his life not loving him. And so everything, the walls went down. Sorry.
You're good.
No,
You're all right. It's real.
But I did. I made that conscious decision, was that if I was going to bury him, I was not going to spend the last 3 months or however of his life not loving him. And that was for me. It was for him too, but it was mostly for me, because that wasn't how I wanted things to end. And that's where the loving part could come in. You know, I'm going to love you. You're going to know that I love you with your last breath. And I don't know that it was that, but, you know, his attitude started to shift, and he became more open about wanting to get help, wanting rehab. And, you know, that's when he went to Brighton, and that's when things started to change.
That's like, what, 30 years of in and out of treatment, active abuse.
In and out of jail.
In and out of jail. I mean, I've heard some of his stories. I just imagining
Crazy.
being his mother, all of this trauma and this pain, and to come to this point where somebody says you have to detach, and so you do, only to realize, because Johan Hari, the guy that talks about connection, he says he firmly believes that you're not supposed to detach from someone, that you're supposed to keep the connection there. But when we look at like rock bottoms, we talk about how you have to let them go, you have to not enable, you have to. Were you walking a fine line then? Like, I mean, as far as I'm gonna love you, and I'm gonna make sure that you know that I love you, but I'm not going to enable you, and I'm still gonna have these strong boundaries, and I'm still going to be protecting myself, right?
Tough love, so to
Tough
speak.
love, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, even though I hate that. I
Hate
hate
that
that
term?
expression. I do.
It's kind of an un-PC
yeah.
expression
Yeah.
nowadays.
Yeah, tough love. What's tough love? Do you beat the shit out of them? Do you, do
Spank
you
'em.
spank them? Do you call them names? What is tough love?
It's a really good point.
So do you feel that the detachment? I don't know. I would have a hard time believing that you detached love from him at some point. I mean, that's not what you're saying.
That's not healthy. That's as unhealthy as enabling. That falls into that all or nothing. And I just, this may be my own, just from my own experience and whatnot, but I don't believe that you can ever stop loving a child. Circumstances can be such that they can't be a part of your life because they're toxic or whatnot, but there were times that I wished I could just not care. Just
so
because
much easier.
it would have been so much easier, and the pain would not have been as intense as it was. And I could get mad for a day, I could go to the mad side, but I'd always return to that, the tenderness and the love. And I don't think either person can survive with that.
So we
Or
had
in the absence of that.
we had a couple questions. Kevin, did you have a question?
Nothing huge. I guess it kind of reaffirms it, and you make me feel better when I go, oh, I get it. Like I learned something, like, because I've always equated sort of my own recovery with I can't remember what you call those things, but where you're on a plane and you're going down, and the pilot says, put the mask on your face first before you put it on your kids. And that's kind of what I'm getting out of it. That's kind of what you needed to do. You're not going to save him with just love or enabling all my children, you need to breathe and you need to live, and then you're all dead because you didn't put the mask on yourself first. So you needed to withdraw and make yourself stronger so that he had somebody that had the knowledge and the strength and the wherewithal that he could come to you and you would give him the proper support rather than giving all of your energy to him, which was going into drugs, even though you had good intentions and it was love, but ultimately you were enabling him
absolutely
unconsciously, of course, unwittingly. And like your doctor gave you that advice that you need to let go. You need to put this energy in yourself. And I equate that with put the mask on yourself first. That way they have someone to be able to help them, so that they can live, or else you're all dead.
And exactly. Then nobody's there, nobody's left standing. But that's a great analogy, because if you don't take care of yourself, and you're not there. I mean, I went through breast cancer in the middle of all of this, and during that time, I had to step back from Chad, because if I didn't stay positive, that's the first thing they told me is you've got to stay positive. And so I eliminated people from my life that brought in negativity and drama. And that happened to be two of my children. Now, did I still speak with them? Yeah, I did. And loved them, but they weren't a part of my life during that point, like normally it would be. Because if I had stayed where I was at, I don't know that I would have survived the cancer, because it was just that bad. It was just that painful, and that I think, and if I were to hope of anything to come out of this to a parent that listens, is that you really believe that you're the only one going through this, and you think you're crazy. But then you hear other parents saying the very same things, and all of a sudden you're not so alone, and you're not so crazy, and you have a support system, even if just knowing that what you're going through is typical, not normal, but it's typical of individuals who have a loved one that's battling drugs. But if the reason, when my doctor told me that, the reason that I kind of made that, I told him, I can't, it's gone to a point that it's not just affecting me emotionally, but physically, and I can't do that. That's when that was when I started taking care of myself. And if I could go back, I would do it. I would do my best to take care of myself. Like I said, there's a process that parents go through too. We have to hit our rock bottom, and we have to get to a point where, if we're going to survive, we have to do that gentle detachment. And that's a really, really painful, hard place to be at.
So I want to ask you a question, kind of explore this. We haven't really talked about this. You and your husband at the time, and like all of this process even today, like maybe describe some of that and kind of talk about that. Were you guys on the same side? Was there a lot of was Chad bouncing back and forth where he was getting advice from you or getting less advice from is it your ex-husband? Yes. Okay. I mean, what was that like for Chad and for you and for your ex-husband as well? Because a lot of people have similar stories where they're, dealing with the parents that have had this divorce aspect of it, and then not as well, but maybe the parents are still together and they're not on the same side or the same team.
And you know what? I see that a lot. It's like one person can do that gentle detachment and the other one can't. And then you start sneaking. again, that addictive behavior. You start lying about how much groceries cost because you gave them $20, even though the other parent had said no. And that alone right there just, kills the trust.
So maybe talk about what
we went
specifically
through.
you, yeah.
Well, that's a really hard question because my husband was an addict too. It was a secret. And, during this time that Chad really started to circle the drain, he was getting deeper and deeper into his addiction. And, you have to understand that, the addict, either regardless of who it is, they have to make you responsible. They have to make you responsible for everything. Because, no one will look, no one will consider. And in desperation to be able to fix it, sometimes you latch onto it. Like I said earlier, okay, if it's my fault, then I can fix it. If I did this, I can fix it. And so I was already in that state unknowingly of being blamed for everything and taking on that responsibility because, even if you don't know there's an addiction in your home, even if it's a complete secret, the behaviors are there. And everyone is affected by the behaviors. Even if you don't know. And that was kind of the case, so that's kind of a hard question. But yeah, we were often at, and still to this day, it's a struggle. Because, his dad still battles his addiction. His dad is like Chad in that he has a very good heart, but his addiction has run his life, and he has a total different attitude about it. He and Chad, I think, communicated better on a level, and that always bothered me because I thought, but wait a minute, I'm the one here. I'm the one still standing. But what I realized is they were both addicts, so they knew each other's language. I didn't know his language. And so, there was a different, probably even on a lot of respects, a closer relationship because they were both addicts. And,
I think that's really good because when I was younger and I was always using, I didn't really have a great relationship with my dad, but he could see right through my bullshit because I spoke the exact same language. While my mom, on the other hand, I always had the wool pulled over her eyes consistently because she didn't live it. She did not go through the cycle, and so that probably really had to be a struggle to try and find that, because a lot of people when they live with an addict or when they run into an addict, they think there's just these immediate thoughts of, why don't you just stop doing this, or why don't you and in reality it takes for a lot of people, it takes an addict or it takes someone to go through their own throes of addiction to understand really what's going on in their head.
and to speak the same language.
Yeah.
Chad and I didn't speak the same language. I don't think that we still do in a lot of ways because I've never been addicted. I've never been.
Well, you've had your own obsession. I mean,
Yeah.
the way that you...
I shouldn't say I haven't been addicted because I have.
Yeah,
I've been addicted
I was gonna
to my
say.
son.
I mean, not a lot of just the trailer story shows, because people who struggle with addiction or with obsession go to great lengths to ease that. And so I think that you had to go through that process to get to where you're more understanding.
Absolutely. And, one of the hardest things for me when I'm working with parents of addicts, of kids, is to be giving them the advice and the counsel, knowing that they can't do it. They haven't been through enough of the process to be at that place that they can do it. They can make stabs at it, they can try, but they can't do it until you go through your own process of getting so tired of hurting, so tired of losing other relationships because they can't stand to see your pain anymore. And so that's really hard, because I know, I've got 25 years experience with this, so I know from a parent as well as a clinician the answers. But as a parent, I also know that you can't do it, that there's certain things you have to go through. You have to hit your rock bottom, whatever that is, before you can, look at yourself and say, I need to detach, or I've got to stop giving him money, or I've got to stop doing this, because that love is so paramount and so driving. Because I can't speak for fathers, but I know as a mother, the big question often is why can't I love him enough? Why can't I love him enough to make him stop? And so it's kind of a double-edged sword.
Well, it's hard, especially, before I had kids, I was very much a give advice type of a person, where I would say, oh, yeah, that's a problem in your relationship, or that's a problem with your child, just fix it. And it's so insane when you actually have your own child. Like, I remember when that would be at least my closest experience, I would say, to like a God presence, was holding my child and watching that whole process take place. And when I actually...
And the change of your own heart.
Absolutely. And I was holding him, and I just thought to myself, I literally would do anything for him, and I've just met him. Like 10 seconds ago, I would die for him right this second. It's just so powerful. So my mind changed when I started seeing that in other people, when they go to these great lengths and great depths of just... You're just like, you did what? You drove where? You gave how much money again? You took him to another rehab, and it's like, it's just the...
You paid his rent?
Right.
Again?
And hearing all the outsiders just criticize the parents, and it's so...
lonely.
Yeah.
I'll tell you. In fact, another therapist that I work with, and that I've worked a lot with in the past, he asked me about Chad. He has a daughter that he's been through the same things with. And he was so excited, and he was so happy. And usually you don't get that from people, because they're thinking, well, hopefully he can hang on to it. But it was so refreshing. It was so refreshing to have somebody share my joy at Chad's sobriety, no matter how long, irrespective of it's going to last. Because as a parent, when you get to that point where you can do the things that you need to do, it can become very lonely, because everybody else reaches that point. Like I mentioned with my own kids, they were tired of seeing me hurt, and they were tired of him, coming in and out. And so, towards the end, I can honestly say that I don't know. That was a loneliness that I don't think I've ever experienced before. And I've been single and by myself for a lot of years. And so to have somebody share my joy just by saying, oh my gosh, that's awesome, rather than just kind of nodding their head, which I get a lot.
I do that all the time.
I get a lot.
I'm like, hope they can keep it.
I know. I think that too. I think that sometimes too, and I'm thinking, oh, you know what? This isn't. This is your first rodeo. But it is, and he shared that it becomes very lonely when you're the last man standing.
So we had a pause for a minute. My wife actually chimed in. I think we should talk about that, because I thought it was a very, very good question.
I was going to ask if you weren't going to.
No, I think we should. So my wife asked you a question, and obviously in the state of Utah, there's a very high activity rate of Mormon, but not just talking about Mormon religion, but just religion as a whole. I know there's a lot of people out there that have, when they see their children kind of making mistakes, you're very down looked on in the neighborhood. You kind of hide, at least from what I saw growing up in a very, very high dense, it's like you kind of shy and hide your kids away a little bit, and you're very cautious about that. But your answer to the resolution of the fix is they just need to go to church. They just need religion.
They just need to, yeah. And probably when I was a young mom, and hadn't had the experiences that I had have been through with Chad, I probably would have said, I mean, people would say that to me. My parents would say to me, honey, he just needs the gospel. He just needs the gospel.
It's so funny hearing that.
Yeah, because have you heard it? Have you? I mean, and I'm not trying. I'm not trying to be disrespectful at all. That's the last thing. Yeah. It's a good, it's a good, healthy lifestyle. But for me, what they need is a connection to a higher power, be it God, be it whatever. And that advice goes for, the parent too. You have to have a connection to a higher power, somebody that's bigger and greater than you. Otherwise, there's no hope. And you lose hope during this process, and things don't end up well. And over the years, I've had hope is kind of my is it mantra? Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have, I've always been able to have hope, but I've also always worked on my own with my relationship to the higher power. And honestly, if Chad can stay sober and be able to accomplish the goals that he has for himself and for other people, I don't care if he never goes to church again. That,
It's surface level almost.
It's surface.
I mean, it's a luxury thing rather than a necessity.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's like today when we were talking earlier and we were talking about going off sugar. And I had said to you, Chad's trying to go off sugar, and your first response was, "What the hell?
Yeah.
He shouldn't be
Kick the
going off
heavy shit
anything.
first, yeah.
He shouldn't be going off anything except staying sober." And you can say that too. Is that I mean, regardless of your religion, if you are unable to connect emotionally, how do you experience God? How do you experience, and how do you have faith that there's somebody bigger than you that knows more than you that you can lean on in those weak moments?
But even just as like silly as the whole sugar thing, this is Chad also dealing with himself. This is this is a need that he's coming up with for him, and it's working for him. So let's talk about Chad for a second. Where is he at right now with this?
Yeah, we need to end the story. We stopped it 2 years ago.
Okay.
And let's put in perspective the timeline. So you said he started when he was about 13. And how old is Chad now?
He's 40. He'll be 41 in December.
Well, when I see him, I'm going to make fun of him for that. Okay.
Yeah, you can make fun of his age, not mine.
Okay. Deal.
Where is Chad now? And I hesitate because you guys know more about Chad than I do. and I
Probably.
might be saying, "Oh, he's done this, and the other," and you guys are thinking, maybe. So I can only say from my perspective and my experience, he is doing things that I never thought he would do. I mean, Chad, go to a meeting.
Yeah.
And want to.
And
want
want
to,
to.
yeah.
No, because and I think this is what was different this third time. Because I probably should mention, he went to inpatient 3 times
Just in the last year.
in the last year,
Okay.
within, a couple of months of each other. He himself checked himself in and then told me that he had relapsed. So it was all him. The biggest thing that I notice with Chad is the humility. He's never had the humility. He's always thought he knew more, he knew better, he knew himself better. But he has such a humility now that, it blows me away.
See, the first time I just want to add this part into it because it kind of, we show this huge gap of Chad, but like people think, well, maybe he's just been into drugs his entire life and everything. But so I go into rehab and he was the first person I met. And I talked to him and I was scared because it's the first time I've ever admitted to myself that I have an alcohol problem. And he, came to me and started talking to me and says, you got this. And gave me a lot of support. But 2 days later, he asked me if I could proofread his biography. And it's just a quick page and a half so he can basically share about him in front of everybody that's there as a patient. And he asked me to proofread it. And I read it, and I was like completely blown away by him. I mean, talented kid.
Oh.
So talented with baseball, with, his ability to golf, musician.
Now, he'd argue with you on the whole golf.
Well,
golf thing.
I golfed with him on rehab.
Yeah.
We went golfing. He's pretty good. He's better than
He is.
Zach.
He just
Yeah,
doesn't
he's way
think he
better
is.
than me.
But we played in a hailstorm out there. But has a degree in English at at a very high university. Did that. I mean, it's not just stuff that he just doing drugs. I mean, he's really talented.
He is. He's talented. He's gifted. He's intelligent, very intuitive to other people's feelings, and he's a great person. And being able to experience that in him has made it all worth it, as he's been sober and doing things that he never would have done before, and wanting to. Turning down fun things because, I got a meeting at 7.
Wow.
Sometimes I think,
Wow.
who are you and where's my son?
It must be so heartening for you just to hear
It
those
is.
words.
It is. And I'm seeing things that I have never seen in Chad before as far as recovery goes. I mean, I've always known his heart. And in fact, I don't know if any of you were there, but one of the things that I had always struggled with, because he and his dad share the same language, and have that bond, I often, would question, well, what am I doing? What am I doing? How am I helping? And I happened to attend his coin, is that what it's called?
Coin-in.
The coin-in, the last time when he left rehab. And as everybody was going around the room, and they were saying such wonderful things about him that I've always seen, that he hasn't been able, that his addiction has kept him away from. But as each one of them went through and, everything was wrapped up, I sat there for a minute and I thought, and I don't say this to toot my own horn, I really don't. But I realized that everything that people were saying about Chad were things I've heard people say about me. And, that was kind of the icing on the cake to realize that, with all the, oh my gosh, all the things the craziness and all the, constantly, being right on top of things, that the things that are most important to me, other people saw in him. And, yeah. And, I need to say to parents, too, this experience has been excruciatingly painful. It's one of those things that unless you've been through it, you don't know. But I don't think about those. Those aren't my memories of Chad. Do I remember some of them? Yeah, I do. But most of my memories of Chad growing up are the good things that he did. Paying a little girl $10 for a doll she was selling when all she wanted was $1. Giving people money when he didn't have it himself. And so, I think the greatest thing to know is that there's always hope. As long as you're drawing breath and they're drawing breath, there's always hope. And you have to cling to that. And, it's what'll keep you going on a night that you feel like will never end, is that hope. You have to have that. And you have to know that these won't be your memories. Chad's 40 years old. And I feel like for the first time, I'm experiencing my son And I'm so proud of who he is. And that's, if I can say that, because Chad's been in some really bad places. Anybody can. And it's a wonderful place to be in, irrespective of how long it takes. You have to hang on to that hope, no matter how long and how hard the road is. You know, hope has to go before you.
Well, and to kind of run full circle into you're taking the advice from your father too.
Yeah. Because in the end, you know what? If I don't know Chad, if I had kept that distant, you know, that cut off, because Chad never liked that, you know, I'm not sure that Chad would have even gone to rehab.
Wow.
And so, you know, I firmly believe that, you know, that advice that my dad always gave me was true. You know, you have to have boundaries, and there's times that you have to do that gentle detachment, but that's for you. You remove the feeling part of it to protect yourself, but you don't remove the love and the support.
Man, what an incredible story. We're running out of time, but the level of vulnerability that you had just coming in here and sharing that, and sharing all of your experiences through being a parent, and really in this, I mean, this really never-ending just back and forth for so many years, and to hang on and to persevere through it all is just so incredible.
Thank you.
And the story that you have that you shared with us is just so profound. This is easily like one of the best podcasts that we've done so far. It's so good. So I really want to thank you.
And you're the first.
Thank you.
You're the first woman on the podcast.
Yeah,
Really?
We've been overloaded with just this
Toxic masculinity.
Toxic, yeah.
So we're bringing.
Yeah.
My mom, she reminds me a lot of you. Just very soft spoken lady. My mom said,
Oh, I'm not soft-spoken.
Well, you sound like it here, but my mom's not too. I'm saying she comes that way, but she's like a high school teacher, can just, you know.
Someone once described me as being, you know, tough and tender.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much a good definition of how I am. I prefer the tender, but I can be as tough as I need to be.
Like my mom texted me and she said, I love your podcast. You're missing one thing. I was like, what's that? Because she had to put on a whole other text, and she just wrote women. So thank you for coming on tonight.
Thank you for having me.
It's been an honor to know your son. He was really helpful for me. I'm still friends with him to this day. I did a lot of IOP with him too. He's a great son. He's a really, really neat person.
He is. Thank you. I'm glad that you guys experienced that.
I think
amongst all them.
you helped a lot of parents out.
Yeah.
Sort of clarifying and
Absolutely.
Well, and you know
making them
that's
feel a little bit better about not being so lost. Like
Or alone.
Or
you know,
alone.
alone. Especially, you know, on all angles of it. It's hard with the siblings, of all the, you know, the out of balance with everything, the spouse. It just you're not alone.
yeah, and that's so true. And you know that's, and I keep kicking it around, but you know, that's kind of my passion right now, is if I can help another parent survive this by being able to share my experiences and, like Zach said, to be vulnerable, because I don't like to be vulnerable.
Who does?
Nobody, but I really don't. But yeah, so I appreciate you guys letting me do this, because, you know, this is my passion. This is where my heart is at this
Incredible.
point in my life. So thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. All right. We will, once again, this was Cyndi, and she was phenomenal.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so
Thank
we'll
you.
catch everybody next week. Okay.